Looks like I'm going to be the person that asks the first question everywhere I go. There's always one, isn't there? It's actually a question for Dr. Bird. You came out with an extremely interesting statement of something like, all of that data and yet still nobody knows who we are, which I absolutely find... I'm sure it's not true for a start, shall we say.
So all that data and
nobody knows, yet still nobody knows who we are. Yeah. And I'm just wondering, raising the H word again, have you tied in with housing associations who do a lot of work in communities, have community health teams and obviously all the community investment there, because this is the sort of thing they would bite your hand off?
you're absolutely right, and we have had tentative discussions with them when we've gone to a place. They needed a lot more lead-in time normally, and by the time a council have kind of got themselves organised with the contract, it's always a bit late. But you're absolutely right, we need to get involved with them, and a lot of housing associations I feel that we probably are missing, because they are dealing with the families and they're dealing with the community and trying to make the place a better place.
You need housing associations rather than local authorities who retain their own.
Okay, so
they can act a lot.
any housing association you think would be good? Okay, I'll talk to you, please do.
Yep, Bill, is it? Yes? Sorry, I wasn't sure if I remembered your name correctly. But
yeah,
yes, I was just wondering for the game that you have developed. Obviously, it's very interesting for children, but how do you make it engaging for adults? What is it like? Could you give us a little bit of...
Because we get community groups, so it's 50% children, 50% adults. In fact, it's gone up a bit to about 55% adults now who play it. So they do it initially with their children, the primary schools. So primary schools are the engine to get it going. Then the grandparents and the aunts and the uncles and the neighbours all start taking place. Then you get community groups, so councils, workplaces, but lots of small community groups then put a team in and they get going, and then you start to build up. But that all happens really quickly. That happens within 10 days to 2 weeks. So you get this sort of, because people are seeing so many people outdoors, they're thinking, what's going on here? What's happening? Because the numbers are big. So you start to get that big time. So the community groups, about half of schools, half of community groups. And that's how we get the engagement. But the engine is always the primary school initially. We get 100% of all primary schools in a place, guaranteed pretty much every time.
Okay, and is it like a question game? Does it provide questions at different points?
No, all they have, the more beatboxes they touch, the more points they get. So very much on the family side, parents and children start doing things together they've never done before, and the biggest feedback we get is that as a family we've done something together, and that's, and hearing what you're saying, that is, and it makes me realise how important that is and how often that doesn't happen. But the children tend to be, the biggest group is 5 to 12, 13. You do get teenagers. The biggest adult cohort is about 20 to 50, 40. We get about 10% over the age of 50. So it's young families really is the main thing. But the community groups are all ages. We've got nursing homes and others and all sorts of community groups that play.
Very good, thank you.
I'm just going to use my natural voice. That's all right. Can everyone hear me?
No.
Bill, you'd, or Dr. Bird, you'd be pleased to know I know that cricket green really well.
Okay.
Just opposite the Wilson Hospital where I worked for a few years up in Mitcham. You've got a lot of data and a lot of information. I was just wondering, where does that go? What does it link in with? Primary care, NHS Trust, local authority? What is being done with that information at a kind of a population health level?
So, yeah, it's a really good question. So we've started collecting loads more. It used to be just physical activity and the ONS for mental health. And that went back to the Council and Public Health. So Public Health commission it almost every time. NHS ICB is beginning to. In fact, most of those areas I've shown have got ICB involvement. And they're starting to kind of get their heads around the data. But we ask them, what questions do you want? We could ask any question to 20 to 30% of the population. And they say, I don't really know. And I think, what? So what we're trying to do is kind of work more with academics. So we're working with the University of Exeter, Professor Helen Dodds on the children's side. But that data, and if there's anyone who wants, because we have got permission with GDPR, we have got permission for anonymising it to give that data to anyone who would do it for research. It's free. I mean, there are millions of little data points we've got pretty much. But it goes back to the council. We then prepare it for the local authority, for public health, and now increasingly for ICB. So it stays local. But when we consolidate it, we haven't got really people who are saying, we'd love to look at that data and make... So any offers, I can give it to you.
The potential is really huge, isn't it? And just if I may, Alison, you're looking to work with NHS Trust. Are you also looking to, say, work with schools or...
So we work with schools, and we've done a lot of work with schools already, because that's obviously the access point. But it's really interesting. One of the things that schools tell us is that they can put so much right, and I think there's often a big emphasis on schools helping children and young people with their mental health. But they said that they can only do a small amount. It's got to go back to the families, and that's the key thing here. We're not used to treating whole families. We often put the focus of the mental health problem on the individual. And one of the things that I always say is a person's mental health is dependent on the quality of their relationships. And we've lost a lot of that. But yeah, schools are really important for at least setting those initial.
And I'm just wondering, as it is now, who has access to this, or who can use LOHA at the moment? So
at the moment, a lot of charities are buying LOHA services for their different demographic groups. But as I say, I think personally it could be very, very effective within NHS or social care. You're never sure when you're building these things, but I've seen it really transform. All 23 families were significantly changed for the better by just simply doing those activities together. And it comes back to what Bill's saying about families coming together, and it almost seems strange, doesn't it? But unless you actively do something to help families connect, they can live very separate lives in the same house quite happily. Well, not happily, unfortunately, but they do live in the same house, but without really connecting with each other.
Hi there, sorry, Dr. Bird, you're getting all the questions today, but I'm a GP, so coming from kind of a health background, we struggle a lot with kind of families' uptake of vaccinations and immunisations and things like that. Is that an area of work that have you been looking at, or is that something that's kind of completely out of...
No, we started looking for health checks because the great thing is we can be sneaky and just add points. So they fill in the questionnaire, they get 100 points. They all fill in the questionnaire. Vaccination will give you 50 points. They'll do their vaccinations. They'll do anything to win from a point of view, from a school point of view and their team point of view. It's a healthy competition. But absolutely, we haven't actually done it for vaccinations, but we absolutely could do because all we need to do, we get people to, like the museums, we work with them, and we put a beatbox at the back of the museum, and suddenly they got, I think it was 8 times more families came to that museum over that weekend just because we put a beatbox at the back. So we get anywhere to parks and the Canals and River Trust you saw, we get them along the canal towpath and they know who they are because we've obviously they've registered. So for vaccinations, simply putting a beatbox in the vaccination place and then double points or triple points, you wouldn't believe how effective that could be. I thought you were trying to get rid of people. Whereabouts are you? Swindon. Well, we've done it twice there, but it would be nice to go back.
Hello. Hi, sorry, I'm this corner. I'm a GP, and I'm a clinical director for my PCN. One of the things that really came out, this is mainly to Dr. Bird, is about the trust in the consultation for the child. The clinical medical model we use now, that really doesn't focus. It's not a part of what we do generally because we are sort of reactive more than preventative, even though we try to do that. And so I'm just wondering, how can you see trust within, how do you build trust, in a consultation to empower or to change the directive of a child's life, knowing that we know that, a lot of the negative outcomes, and we're seeing so much of it coming through in general practice, is actually based on negative or adverse childhood events, and keeping children safe. So that's the one thing. And the other question I did want to ask is also about the LOHA, and how could we get it? Is it available for everyone, or could we use it for our PCN? Could we use it for our patients? Because it's part of the problem we have is the disintegration or the fractioning of services, especially for children's mental health. If you have any child that's waiting for mental health, they're waiting months and months on end, and it's really difficult for us as general GPs, but it's also really difficult for the parents and the families that that are supporting these young people.
I'll partially answer the first one because I think you'll be better qualified to answer about trust, but I do think in the NHS we've lost the health creation part. So when a patient comes to see us, we're so keen to get their blood pressure and get all their cough things and get everything. I heard a statistic yesterday saying that the average time we allow a patient to speak before we interrupt them is 11 seconds, which is horrendous. And I think it's because, and yet when you go right back to when my dad was a GP as well, going to the doctor was often no medical input. It was a health creation. There was a real trust. There was a real understanding. There was listening. There was there was a kind of, but no medicine came out of it. It was just that consultation was the health creation, and we've lost that health creation part. So we take health away, making them feel a bit worse, and we think we're adding it by taking a blood pressure and other things like that. So I think this trust element, particularly for children, I don't think we're well trained in it, and I don't think we're doing it very well at all. And I do think actually it's a much bigger problem, which means that they don't actually want to do the things we're wanting. So there's a disconnect that's happened. I think it's an area which we absolutely do need to address. I think we should think that every single time a patient turns up to the practice or any part of the NHS, they should have an experience that makes them feel better about themselves. And I don't think many places have that.
Yeah,
but I'll ask you to
yeah, well, I would completely agree, because I think one of the things that is really important is the idea of building on people's strengths, and too often we point at what people can't do or shouldn't, then what they're not doing, and it just demoralises them. Why would you turn up somewhere to be told how hopeless you are at something? You just don't do it, do you? And and I've been around in the healthcare sector a very long time, and it's really about building their strengths, helping them recognise their own strengths, and that builds trust, because once you've got that self-confidence, that self-esteem, then who you can and can't trust, and who you want to sort of build a trusting relationship with, and then hopefully reach out for good healthcare. So yeah, for me it's fundamentally about strength and building that trust in a positive way.
You want to know about.
Oh, and LOHA. So how do we get LOHA? Well, ideally we'd love the NHS to take up LOHA, because we can see the difference that it makes, and when the charities and that we work with, one of the charities that I ran the programme with a couple of weeks ago, they said to me, you know what, everybody should do the LOHA programme, because it really teaches you about your own emotions, how to regulate your own emotions, and how to build good, positive relationships. And I said, well, yeah, that's fundamentally what it's all about. But yeah, so we would happily hand it over even to the NHS if they could use it. But if you want a conversation with us about trialling it, then by all means come and talk to us.
Can I have a quick question? How old? What's the age group?
The age group at the moment is 11 to 19-year-olds. We will eventually work with younger children, but at the moment it's that young person's mental health group, because that's where the biggest problems are with the services.
I hate these things. Hi, I'm John. I'm the Services Director for charity WizKids, and we support young wheelchair users from 0 to 25, and we also run a couple of NHS wheelchair services. My question is really around, do you work specifically, or have you worked specifically with children with disabilities? From my perspective, actually, children that are wheelchair users. As everything you've said today has resonated with myself and my colleague. We see a lot of the children self-harming. We watch them as they get older. I've sadly watched them deteriorate mentally as they get into their teens. And we also see children developing all kinds of different things like tics and things like that. So I just wondered, have you worked with children specifically with the disabilities? Have you looked at that? And also, is there anything you've thought about or have you done in terms of campaigning to get this as a more of an integrated approach within ICBs into the sort of, it happens organically?
Yeah, there's lots of questions in there. So yes, I mean, throughout my career, certainly I've worked with young people with a range of abilities and disabilities. So that's not a problem at all. And the activities that anyone can do them. We do want to change one or two things in terms of we want to put a voice behind the digital therapist at some point, but at the moment that's the only thing that we really need to think about in terms of reaching all types of ability. And yes, I mean, yeah, what we see is that young people's self-esteem it just grows because they have real meaningful connections with the people around them. So that's why it works so well. And yeah, we'd love ICBs and the NHS to take up LOHA. We're talking to the health innovation networks at the moment. But they're a bit of an oxymoron because they sort of say, well, in 4 or 5 years we might be able to get you through into the NHS, by which time you're not really an innovation anymore, are you? It's so slow getting that take up. Whereas we find if we work with services locally and they want to try those, trial what we're doing, that's a really good opportunity for them.
Hello, I'm sorry to keep everyone. Just a quick reflection whilst you were talking, and yeah, it sounds like such an amazing piece of work, everything that you're doing, the LOHA stuff. It just made me think in terms of kind of implementing it within the NHS. So there's a similar, not similar in terms of supporting young people's mental health, but there's a similar programme to support people with sleep issues and insomnia. It's called Sleep Station. Have you heard of it? Yeah,
I've heard of
and
it,
it's a really great kind of when you kind of put it up, because I've actually done that program and it's really, really, really good. And I was recommended it through my GP and stuff, and it's free in some areas and you have to pay in others. I did have to pay a substantial fee, but it's the way that that's kind of rolled out. And when you were speaking, I was like, that would be great if that's how it could be adapted, like with this LOHA service within local GPs, to kind of give that as like the first point of contact instead of, I don't know, with the sleeping thing, oh, here's some sleeping pills, crack on, rather than being like, let's do this CBT intense course for you to understand what the issues are there and here's all the resources and easy to access and stuff. So it just kind of made me think of that, and in terms of how they implemented it with Sleep Station and stuff, but obviously I'm not aware of kind of how they managed to do that, but that just kind of reminded me of it.
Yeah,
it's quite similar.
It's sometimes local ICBs will pay for their local population to be able to access the service. So that's how come it's free for some and others have to pay. But I mean, we've tried to keep the costs to a very realistic cost. And actually, the whole programme for LOHA costs less than one consultation with a therapist in the NHS.
Can we call the session to a close? Because everybody's getting hungry.